gonna create an FX makeup effect using glass, but we're gonna do this the professional way and be using a flexible material that looks like glass as opposed to gluing a hard plastic piece to our face, which could actually cause a real injury. Now, you can make the cuts however you want, whether that be silicone, latex, or even wax like I'll be using today. Gonna be using Mehron Synwax because it's so easy to use and I love how translucent it is, so I won't be spending a ton of time painting a skin tone on those cuts. The model in the packaging is a bit of a bonus. Now we want this stuff to stick really well, so going to put down some spirit gum first so that wax has something to grab onto. And always make sure you soften your wax before you go in there and work with it. Decided on 3 cuts and just going to get that basic mound shape down. Also decided last minute, let's put a little through my brow. Use some mineral oil to get the rest of it blended. Now to make the cuts. I did make the one on the cheek a little wider so we could fit more of those glass shards in there. Finishing the blend by adding a little bit of skin texture using a red stipple sponge. Also, just gonna blot off any of that excess mineral oil. Using Mehron Fixative A to seal it, but you can totally use latex if you don't have this. Gonna start with some bruising and irritation, and gonna be using the Mehron Bruise Wheel. I'm also gonna apply this with an orange stipple sponge because I want a little bit of texture. Sticking with the bright red because I really wanted the injury to look very fresh. I'm using around the cuts, but also the eye because I feel like it would just look strange if we ignored the eye altogether. Adding a little bit of that dark red. Gonna use this more to make some scrapes. Just gonna put some on a black stipple sponge, scrape it across my skin just to get a couple little clusters of lines. Now we got our basic injury down. I am gonna go in and darken a few areas with the dark blue, mostly using this around the eye though. To color the cuts in, I used a blend of the dark red and a touch of the blue. I felt like the dark red by itself just wasn't dark enough, and I really wanted those slices to look nice and deep. Thought it might be fun to add a cut on my lip, though I didn't want to use wax for this, so I'm just gonna go in with a few coats of rigid Collodion. If you're not familiar with this stuff, I highly recommend you check it out. I do have a tutorial on how you can get really fast scars using Collodion. Since this is cream, we're gonna powder it and make sure it's all set. Now for the glass. This was made with smooth-on rubber glass. Decided just to use an empty plastic container to pour the mixture into. If you are gonna use a container to pour into, just make sure that it's not all scratched up and scuffed, because all those imperfections on the surface are going to translate on the surface of your fake glass. I'm gonna wipe this out with alcohol just to make sure that there's no dust or particles. I'm doing this because this is also a platinum silicone product. If there's any sulfur, it's gonna mess with the product actually setting up properly. And one of the biggest culprits of sulfur is latex. So if you work with a lot of latex, you're gonna wanna make sure that you really clean out whatever you're gonna be using for the glass. I'm just gonna poke some holes in the top of the containers so I could pour it out that way. I find this to be much cleaner than if I pull off that entire foil seal. Now, it's just a 1-to-1 ratio, and I'm just gonna make sure that I'm not gonna make too much product because I don't want the glass to be that thick. Just make sure you mix it well and pour it in. This product does take 16 hours to cure, so you're definitely gonna wanna make sure you make this before you start your makeup. Well, 16 hours has passed and we are all set up. I wanna see if I can get this whole thing out in one piece. And you can see just me trying to get that corner, and it's just breaking off into these nice little glass-like pebbles. There you go, that's pretty cool. And it is crystal clear. Now let's break it up into some shards. I was making larger and smaller pieces because at the time when I was doing this, I really wasn't sure if I was gonna do a tutorial with a giant shard coming out of my arm or smaller ones on the face, which is obviously what I did decide on. But it's really fun because you can get a wide range of different sizes and shapes. If you did pour your slab a little thicker than you wanted to, you can actually split these pieces into thinner parts. I love how the shiny surface really reflects that light and makes it look like actual glass. Okay, now let's get some in those cuts. I'm gonna be using Telesis silicone adhesive because, well, this material is a silicone and it's gonna give me the best hold. I'm also gonna add the glue to some random areas just so you can get an idea of what this glass looks like without an actual wound buildup. I did use tweezers for the smaller pieces. Just know that this stuff is really brittle, so if you squeeze too hard, it will actually break the piece up into smaller parts. I learned this the hard way, so take your time and be gentle. Okay, that large piece looks pretty cool, but I think I wanna go with multiple smaller pieces. It's all glued. Now let's add some blood. I'll be using Fleet Street drying blood in dark. Just gonna fill in those cuts and add some drips. For the pieces of glass with no actual wound, I'm just going to create the illusion of a cut with that blood. Just adding a little more blood, and decide to use this to add some bloody scrapes with that black stipple sponge. Decided that spatter might be a fun little extra detail. If you're using Fleet Street or a lot of other fake blood brands, they might be a little thick for spattering, so you're probably gonna need to cut it down with some water to get it thinner. Just soften a couple of the speckles with a baby wipe. Now you have a glass injury that is completely safe. But what about safe, crystal clear icicles for something, say, a zombie makeup? Head over to the next video to see how to create them, and I will see you there.